Hello all, and welcome to our literature literature lecture for the topic of religion in Roman literature. Both of our selections today were written by Publius Ovidius Naso, otherwise known as Ovid. He was born in Sulmo, which is 90 miles from Rome, on March 20th, 43 BCE, 1 year after the death of Caesar. He died in Tomis on the Black Sea in either 17 or 18 CE. In exile. He was equestrian by class, and his class meant that he should join a public life in politics, but instead he decided to devote his life to poetry. He was exiled in 8 AD due to what he likes to say, a carmen, a song, and an error, something he did wrong. He wrote a lot of poetry, all marked by their wit, humor, empathy, and insight. His early works have the theme of amor, love, not Roma, and include love, sex, and friendship. These include the Amores, from which we have read 1:8 today, the Heroides, his play The Medea, the Medicamina Facii, which is about cosmetics, the Ars Amatoria, which is the art of love, basically a pickup handbook, and then the Remedia Amoris, which is the remedies of love to tell you how to get over the girl you picked up because you read the Ars Amatoria. The works in the middle of his career are narrative works and political works that are both long, epic poems. The Metamorphoses, from which you read book 3 for today, and the Fausti, which is an epic poem based on the Roman calendar. Finally, after his exile, he writes a lot about missing Rome. The Tristia, which literally means the sad things, the Ibis, which is a curse poem, and then the Epistulae ex Ponto. Both the Tristia and the Epistulae ex Ponto are letters sent back to Rome begging to be let back into Rome. So first let's start with magic and the Amores 1:8. In this poem, Ovid describes a witchy lady that he meets his girlfriend, he sees his girlfriend going to, in order to get some help with her man. He describes this woman thus: she knows the magic arts, the spells of Circe. Her skill turns black broad rivers to their sources. The flux of mating mares, the herbal mixtures, the whirling wheel, she knows their baleful force. At her behest, clouds mass across the heavens. At her behest, day shines clear in the sky. I've seen the stars drip blood, if you'd believe me, and on the moon's fair face, a bloody dye. At night she changes shape. With her old body thick feathered through the dark, I think she flies. I think, and so it's said. And double pupils flash lightning and gleams dart from dual eyes. From ancient tombs she calls past generations and splits the solid earth with sorceries. Compare this depiction of a witch to the depiction of Canidia I read in our magic lecture. Both are drunk old ladies, and they're also completely ludicrous. Here, this witch, who is unnamed, actually, no, she is named, her name is Dipsis, which means drunk lady. She can influence the weather, change shape, and just like Canidia, bring people back from the dead. But now let's look at the gods from Metamorphoses 3. So the Metamorphoses was a 15-book epic poem in which Ovid decided to tell the entire history and mythology of the world from the beginning of the world up into his very day. The majority of the Greek myths we know today are actually due to this 15-book poem. So let's start with Diana and Actaeon. So Actaeon has just finished hunting and was looking for a place to rest while Titania is another name for Diana, while Titania bathed there in the pool, her loved familiar pool, it chanced Actaeon, the day's hunt finished, idly wandering through unknown clearings of the forest, found the sacred grove. So the fates guided him and came upon a cool, damp cave. In this passage, Ovid emphasizes that Actaeon did not know what he was doing. What was about to happen was a chance encounter, and yet he was fated to stumble unknowingly upon what he finds. At once, seeing a man, all naked as they were, the nymphs beating their breasts, filled the whole grove with sudden screams and clustered around Diana to clothe her body with their own. But she stood taller, a head taller than them all. And as the clouds are colored when the sun glows late and low, or like the crimson dawn, so deeply blushed Diana, caught unclothed. Remember, Diana is the goddess of virgins and virginity, and as such, it was a deep crime for a man to see her naked. And so she curses him and says she added words that warned of doom. Now tell you saw me here naked without my clothes, if you can tell at all. And with that one threat, antlers she raised upon his dripping head, lengthened his neck, pointed his ears, transformed his hands to hooves, his arms to long legs, and draped his body with dappled hide, and at last set terror in his heart. So Actaeon is punished for seeing Diana naked by being turned into a stag, the very thing he had been hunting. She is afraid he will tell someone what he saw if she lets him stay as a human. Throughout the Metamorphoses, Diana is depicted as coming to the aid of her followers, who were expected to be virgins, when they are sexually assaulted by men. So in theory, this reaction makes sense. However, this leads to some unfortunate results for poor Actaeon, now turned into a stag. He fled where he'd often followed in pursuit, fled his own folk for shame. He longed to shout, "I am Actaeon, look, I am your master." In this 3-line bit, his own folk are his hunting dogs, which started late but cut across the hills and gained a lead. They held their master down till the whole pack, united, sank their teeth into his flesh. He gave a wailing scream, not human, yet a sound no stag could voice, and filled with anguish cries the mountainside he knew so well. So not only is he turned into a stag, but he is killed by his own faithful companions. Would that he watched, not felt, the hounds, his hounds' fierce savagery. Now they are all around him, tearing deep their master's flesh, the stag that is no stag. And not until so many countless wounds had drained away his lifeblood was the wrath, it is said, of chaste Diana satisfied. So the question here, and it's probably a question I'll either ask in class or as your discussion prompt, is Diana's wrath justified? Is this punishment justified? Now let's move on to another story from this book of Semele. So Jupiter impregnated Semele, and Juno is jealous, so she decides to punish Semele. She disguises herself as an old woman and convinces Semele to ask Jupiter to prove that he is who he says he is, a god. She says he ought to prove his love, if he is Jove, and all the power and glory that's his when heavenly Juno welcomes him. Beg him to don his godhead and take you in the same power and glory in his arms. So Juno molded Cadmus's daughter's mind. So Semele takes this advice and asks Jupiter, "Give me yourself in the same grace as when your Juno holds you to her breast in love's embrace." He would have locked her lips too late. Her words had hastened their way. He groaned. Her wish could never be unwished, his oath never unsworn. In bitterest grief, he soared ascending to the ethereal sky, and by his nod called upon the trailing clouds. Jupiter had sworn upon the river Styx to follow through with what she asked, and therefore he has no way of getting around this promise. And so, he massed a storm with lightning and the squalls, and thunder and the bolts that never miss. And so he tried, as far as he had power, to curb his might. It would not wield the fire, with which he'd felled the 100-handed giant. That was too fierce. There was another bolt, a lighter one, in which the Cyclops forged a flame less savage and lesser wrath, called by the gods his second armament. So Jupiter even tries to not become less powerful, but uses less powerful lightning in order to possibly try and save Semele's life. With this in hand, he went to Semele in Cadmus's palace. Then her mortal frame could not endure the tumult of the heavens. That gift of love consumed her. From her womb, her baby, still not fully formed, was snatched and sewn, could one believe the tale, inside his father's thigh, and so completed there his mother's time. In Roman mythology, mortals could not bear to see a god in their godlike form. So in encouraging Semele to ask to see Jupiter in his true form, Juno is dooming Semele to die. and yet her baby is saved and continues gestating in Jupiter's thigh. He'll be born in his mother's time, which is the rest of his gestation period, and become the god Dionysus / Bacchus. Then the story cuts to Tiresias. So Jupiter and Juno had just had sex and had begun to wonder who enjoys sex more, men or women. Jupiter says women, and Juno says men. So they asked Tiresias, who had been turned into a woman for 7 years. Ovid states, asked then to give his judgment on the joke he found for Jove. And Juno, so it said, took umbrage beyond reason, out of all proportion, and condemned her judge to live in the black night of blindness evermore. Jupiter is angry because Jupiter uses this ruling that women enjoy sex more as an excuse to sexually assault women and nymphs because, well, they want it because they want to enjoy it more. And so he blinds her. She blinds him, but as a recompense, Jupiter also gives him prophecy, which will come into play in a later story. But first, let's look at Echo. Echo was a nymph who had a bad encounter with Juno. And so Echo was still a body, not a voice, but talkative as now, with the same power of speaking, only to repeat, as best she could, the last of many words. Juno had made her so. So Echo echoes not because that is how she was created, but because Juno, a goddess, had made her so. But why? Ovid continues, for many a time, when the great goddess might have caught the nymphs lying with Jove upon the mountainside, Echo discreetly kept her talking, till the nymphs had fled away. And when at last the goddess saw the truth, your tongue, she said, with which you tricked me, now its power shall lose, your voice avail but for the briefest use. So Echo used to distract Juno while Jupiter had sex with nymphs, so Juno punishes her for Jupiter's adultery by making it so that she could only echo the last few things that people said. Finally, on to Pentheus, which is where Tiresias comes into play again. So this story is a good example of what could happen if a god was not properly worshipped. Pentheus is taunting Tiresias about his blindness, and Tiresias says he would wish that he would be blind so he wouldn't see what was in his future. Not distant, I foresee, Tiresias says, when there shall come a new god, Liber, son of Semele. Unless you honor him with holy shrines, you shall be torn to pieces. Far and wide you shall be strewed, and with your blood defile the forests and your mother and her sisters. So it shall come to pass. You will refuse the god his honor due, and mourn that I in this my darkness saw too certainly. Here Tiresias is emphasizing the fact that proper worship of the gods is important. However, Pentheus does not do this, and when he sees the people of Thebes celebrating the Bacchanalia, he states, what lunacy has stolen your wits away, you race of Mars, you children of the serpent, Pentheus cried. Can clashing bronze, can pipes of curving horn, can conjurer's magic have such power that men who, undismayed, have faced the swords of war, the trumpet and the ranks of naked steel, quail before women's wailing, frenzy fired by wine, a bestial rabble, feudal drums? This description of Dionysiac / Bacchanalia rites is very different from proper Roman religion. Clashing, loud noise, magic, women wailing, frenzy fired by wine. It's also interesting to note here that he calls the people of Greece the race of Mars. In fact, this is probably very much influenced by the same Bacchanalia scandal that Livy spoke of in the magic and mystery cult lecture. So then within this, as an embedded story, which Ovid likes to do a lot, is the story of a man who was a worshiper of Bacchus / Liber telling Pentheus why he came to worship him. And this story is an example of what could happen to Pentheus if he doesn't listen or heed Dionysus. So Dionysus was captured by the men on this person's ship, and only the ship's captain believed that he was a deity. The others wanted to sell him and tried to trick him. But being a god, he knew, and he punished them. He stalled the ship mid-water with vines. Now, by that god himself, for there's no closer than he, I swear I tell what's true as past belief. The ship stood still upon the sea as fixed as in a dry dock. The crew, bewildered, rowed with dogged strokes and spread the sails, twin means to make her move. But ivy creeping, winding, clinging, bound the oars and decked the sails in heavy clusters. And so, in addition to halting the ship mid-water, Bacchus turns the men into dolphins. The men leapt overboard, all driven mad or panic-stricken. Medon's body first began to blacken, and his spine was arched into a curve. What magic shape is this? Cried Lycabas, but, even as he spoke, his mouth widened, his nose curved out, his skin turned hard and scaly. By the way, Roman depictions of dolphins are terrifying. You can see one in this mosaic on your screen. It's probably because of myths like this. They're associated with the madness and vengeance of Dionysus / Bacchus. So not only has Pentheus denied Bacchus' power, but he also decides to watch the Bacchic mysteries while being uninitiated, which doesn't end well for him. As Ovid says, in the encircling forest halfway up, there lies a level clearing of bare trees, open and in full view from every side. Here, as his impious gaze was fixed upon the mysteries, the first to see him, first to rush in frenzy, first to hurl her staff, her Bacchic staff, and wound her Pentheus, was his mother. Here, she called her sisters, here, that giant boar that prowls about our fields. I'm going to kill that boar. The whole mad throng rush at him, all united, and pursue their frightened quarry, frightened now for sure, now using less fierce language, blaming now himself, admitting that he's done wrong. Dionysus, as the god of madness, has forced the women who are practicing the Bacchanalia to think that they are seeing a boar, not a man. Pentheus realizes he should have listened to Tiresias and worshipped Bacchus properly, as the line admitting now that he had done wrong suggests. But he admits this a little too late. Wounded, he cries, help, Antinous, mercy. Actaeon's ghost should move your mercy. Actaeon's name is unknown. She tore away his outstretched hand, and Ino seized and wrenched the other off. With no hands left to stretch out to his mother, look, mother, he cried, and showed the severed stumps. And at the sight, Agave howled and tossed her head and hair, her streaming hair, and tore his head right off. And as her bloody fingers clutched at it, cried, hurrah for victory, the triumph's mine. Within these lines, Ovid compares Pentheus' fate to Actaeon's, except in this case, Pentheus has willfully done wrong, been impious, versus Actaeon, who only did so by chance. In the end, his own mother beheads him. And so, as swiftly as the winds of autumn stripped from the tall trees its lightly hanging leaves that forests have fingered, so those wicked hands tore Pentheus limb from limb. That lesson learnt by his example, the Theban women throng the novel rites, honoring the god divine, offering incense at his holy shrine. Thus, the moral of the story: the Theban women use Pentheus as an example of impiety, and you should too. Worship the gods properly or be torn apart by your mother who thinks you're a bore.